Cranes are the ambassadors for two of South Africa's most important ecosystems, the wetlands and grasslands that make up our water catchment areas. All South African residents are dependent upon the careful management of these vital areas in our environment, as are South Africa's cranes. The Zulu-Natal Crane Foundation is a non-profit organisation dedicated to the conservation of South Africa's three threatened crane species, namely the blue crane, which is South Africa's national bird, the wattled crane and the grey-crowned crane.
Well, the Crane Foundation was started nearly 30 years ago when it became apparent that crane numbers were dropping dramatically. In fact, the blue crane population of Natal, which really started it off, had dropped by something like 90%. So conservationists, the Parks Board at the time, got together with farmers to have a look at it, to understand what was happening. What became clear was that that blue cranes, whilst their numbers had dropped in KZN, were surviving quite well in the Karoo and the Southern Cape, and in fact their population had grown in that area. On the other hand, wattled cranes, which are our biggest and most regal cranes, numbers had dropped dramatically. In fact, by the year 2000 there were under 200 birds in the wild. In fact, only less than 80 breeding pairs. So the Crane Foundation really has looked at that, and starting off by saying that cranes, unlike other animals that are endangered, which you can keep in a reserve, you can't do that with birds. They go wherever they decide to go. And where they decide to go is essentially onto landowners' lands. So the only way that we could really look after cranes was to make sure that the landowners bought into the program. We started a program called Crane Custodians. And we made farmers crane custodians, and they generally bought into the program. The result largely of that is that here we are almost 30 years later, and there's been a 50% increase in the population of wattled cranes. They're still very much in danger, but much less so than before.
If you want to work on a book on the cranes with the photographs and the scientific and history part of the cranes, you actually need to know your subject matter. And I think being part of the Crane Foundation and working with the people at the Crane Foundation has certainly assisted in learning more about cranes. I'm having to do a lot of my own research. You're forced into a learning curve that is vitally important to achieving that end objective.
Wattled cranes are the rarest crane on the African continent and listed as critically endangered in South Africa. N3TC is proud to have supported the Crane Foundation with the construction of a wattled crane chick rearing facility, which was completed in 2014. The facility is used to rear chicks destined for release into the wild that are reared by human chick mums, dressed in specially manufactured costumes from the time the chicks hatch to the time of release, when it is believed that they can be integrated into the resident floater flock.
The whole point of this exercise was to train staff to use the facility, to see where faults come in, to see where we need to put fence lines up, to try and work out distance of rearing chicks to areas that have people in, or farms, homesteads, that sort of thing.
Crane chicks must be reared in strict isolation from humans to ensure that they can be fully integrated into the wild. The 7-month-old wattled crane chicks were released into a bird sanctuary because researchers believed that they were not ready to be integrated into floater flocks.
We learnt a lot about the habituation stages of the chicks, which means how easily they will come close to houses and people that sort of thing, and they sort of seem to do that quite readily later on. So when we're rearing for release, we'll have to do an awful lot of extra work just ensuring that distance is kept from the chicks. So these are vital lessons that we needed to learn this year. And then we habituated these chicks specifically for captivity, and that's so they can spend the rest of their life comfortably in an environment they're comfortable in.
The KZN Crane Foundation has gone to great lengths in their efforts towards educating children on the importance of preserving our endangered crane species and their habitat. Jenny Stipich is the Education Officer at the Crane Foundation and creator of the Cranes in the Classroom series of lessons aimed at grades 1 through grade 6.
From that day, sinners' children and sinners' children's children and sinners' children's children's children are protected from harm by the King's people.
Because cranes reflect some of our most valued human qualities, including parental nurturing, faithfulness, and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances, Jenny found our South African cranes an inspiration for her proactive classroom series of lessons for youngsters.
The lessons that we give the children are fun. We sing, we dance, we tell them stories, we play games, and at the same time they're learning vital environmental lessons. Cranes are also life coaches, and we teach the children about issues like AIDS, fidelity. Cranes are wonderful parents and good parenting. There are myths and legends about their bravery, their courage, their vigilance, and then we tell them about chick mums. And it's absolutely fine to not just have a mother, a normal conventional nuclear family with a mother and a father. You can have gogos and you can have chick mums, just like the cranes, and you can be brought up in an extended community. So all these life orientation lessons are used as well with the crane as our educational tool.
When I first started, I went to a school called Uncut Primary, and I asked the learners if they know about cranes, and then they told me that cranes are big, so they're food, especially the cranes are big, so they've got a lot of meat, So that was, it's a reality though. But then I realized that the education is really important. And when you look at the Wattle Crane Recovery Program, it takes a lot of time and a lot of money to raise one chick. And then can you imagine release it back to the wild, and then it's a meat for a family. So the education is really important. But since I've started, the learners, they're loving the cranes now. They can identify them and they know the facts about cranes and wetlands.
Today, more than 50% of the country's wetlands have been lost through human activity. Mining, forestry, crop farming, overgrazing, draining, industrial development, and urbanization. The Crane Foundation understands the need to educate people in order to increase awareness of our crane populations and the need to conserve these unique species and the ecosystems upon which they and human communities so critically depend.
All farmers are conservationists, so this is sort of a myth out there that we go and hunt and go mad, but we look after the land because we are the custodians of the land. So anything that enhances that, it's to our benefit to improve. So we've created one huge grassland, and with the result of that, they've all come back. Lots, up to 98 in a session now. And it's not only the crane that have come back, it's everything else that have come back into this area. I've seen brown hyena, we've got serval, we've got caracal, we've got jackal, we've got monkeys, we've got bushbuck. All those animals have come back into this area in the last 10, 15 years. Those things got to be around for our children and for our grandchildren. And it's fantastic to be able to take people to this place on our farm. It's unique in South Africa that you can find as many crane in a group as you do on this farm. You won't find it anywhere else.
bird watching generally and bird photography to this passion of the cranes. There is an art form, there is this dancing, there's these rituals that no other birds do in that form. And I think to experience them coming into roost as they fly over in the late afternoon, early evening, to follow that route and the pattern, the landing gear comes out, the landing in the water, to see 70, 80 of them at one roosting place is just something quite unique. It's so, just gives you goosebumps. It's just magic.
The Crane Foundation's vision is to use cranes as a vehicle for increasing public environmental awareness in the schools and communities of KwaZulu-Natal, based on the species' absolute dependence on freshwater wetlands and grasslands, which we as humans share.